They set my home ablaze, my sanctuary, my fortress, the place where I'd poured every ounce of my heart and soul, reduced to a roaring inferno in a single vicious act. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the acrid smell of smoke choking my lungs as flames devoured my two-story colonial in Willow Creek Estates. The fire was a living beast, its orange tongues licking at the windows I'd painstakingly chosen. The walls I'd painted with my late husband's favorite shade of blue. The porch where we'd dreamed of growing old together, sirens wailed. Neighbors gawked, but all I could hear was the crackling destruction of my life. The HOA, those smug, power-hungry busybodies, had done this. All because I refused to bow to their ridiculous rules. They thought they could break me. They had no idea I'm Judge Evelyn Carter, a federal judge who's made hardened criminals weep in my courtroom. To them, I was just the stubborn woman who wouldn't sign their HOA contract. They picked the wrong fight. Asterisk, it all began 6 months earlier when I moved to Willow Creek. A picturesque suburban neighborhood with manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses. I'd bought my dream home after years of saving, a place to start fresh. After losing my husband, Tom, to cancer, the house was perfect. A wraparound porch, a garden for my roses, and a study where I could review case files in peace. I was thrilled until the HOA welcome packet arrived, thicker than a legal brief. It was a manifesto of control. Grass couldn't exceed 2.5 inches. Mailboxes had to be approved shades of beige. No more than 2 cars in the driveway. No holiday decorations past January 5th. I laughed out loud, picturing some self-important neighbor with a ruler measuring my lawn. I'd spent 20 years upholding justice, facing down mob bosses and corrupt politicians. No way was I letting a bunch of clipboard-wielding suburbanites dictate how I lived. I tossed the packet in the trash and went back to planting my roses. Asterisk, the HOA didn't take kindly to my defiance. First came the polite letters, typed in Comic Sans, requesting my prompt compliance. I ignored them. Then came the fines: $50 for an unapproved bird feeder, $100 for a fence that was half an inch too tall. I ignored those too, shredding them with a satisfying rip. Soon, the harassment escalated. I'd wake up to find my mailbox spray-painted, with "join or else" in sloppy red letters. My roses were mysteriously uprooted one night, their roots exposed like a crime scene. I installed security cameras, but the HOA's minions were clever, avoiding the lenses. Knew who was behind it. Karen Mitchell, the HOA president, a woman with a perm as tight as her grip on the neighborhood. She'd stop by with fake smiles, dropping hints about how community harmony required my cooperation. I'd smile back, my judge's composure unshaken, and tell her I wasn't interested. Each time, her eyes narrowed, and I could almost see the gears turning in her vindictive little mind. Asterisk, then came that fateful night. I'd been at the courthouse late, presiding over a high-profile case involving a Ponzi scheme. Exhausted but satisfied, I drove home, dreaming of a glass of wine, in my cozy recliner. As I turned onto my street, I saw the glow engine menacing against the night sky. My heart stopped. My house was a fireball, flames shooting from the windows, the roof collapsing in a shower of sparks. Fire trucks lined the street there, hoses spraying futile arcs of water. Neighbors stood in clusters, whispering, some filming with their phones like it was a reality show. I stumbled out of my car, my legs trembling as a firefighter grabbed my arm. "Ma'am, stay back, it's not safe," he shouted. The fire chief, a grizzled man named O'Malley, approached, his face grim. "Judge Carter, I'm sorry. This wasn't an accident. We found evidence of arson Molotov cocktail through your living room window." My blood ran cold. Arson. The HOA had gone from petty to criminal. I clenched my fists, my grief hardening into resolve. They thought they could burn me out. They were about to learn who I really was. Willow Creek's HOA was a suburban dystopia. A petty empire ruled by Karen Mitchell, a self-appointed dictator with a perm as rigid as her need for control. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was a menace, her fake smile masking a vindictive streak that turned neighbors into her personal enforcers. She'd patrol the streets with a notepad, jotting down violations like a secret police chief. A single mom down the street got a $200 fine for her kid's tricycle lingering on the lawn. An elderly couple was slapped with a $150 penalty. For a non-compliant birdhouse, Karen's rulebook was her gospel, and she wielded it like a weapon. Preaching community standards while crushing anyone who dared think for themselves. I'd seen her kind before, bullies cloaked in bureaucracy, not unlike the corrupt officials I'd sentenced in my courtroom. But I wasn't some timid homeowner. I was a federal judge. I wasn't about to let Karen's power trip ruin my peace. The harassment started small but grew sinister. After I ignored their letters, the HOA sent landscaping crews to my yard without permission, hacking my roses to stubs and billing me $3,000 for aesthetic improvements. I refused to pay, sending a legal letter citing property rights. Karen retaliated with late-night inspections, her minions creeping around my property with flashlights claiming to measure my fence or check my siding. One morning, I found my front door splashed with red paint, the word comply scrawled in dripping letters. I upgraded my security cameras, catching blurry figures skulking at night. But they were careful, wearing hoods to dodge identification. Neighbors whispered about Karen's secret meetings, where she'd rally her loyalists to deal with the problem, me. I overheard one neighbor, a nervous guy named Greg, admit he'd been fined $500 for speaking out against her at a meeting. "She's got eyes everywhere," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. Karen's vendetta wasn't just about rules. I learned she had a personal grudge. Years ago, I'd sentenced her cousin, a shady accountant, to 5 years for embezzlement. Karen saw my refusal to join the HOA as a chance to settle an old score, though she didn't yet know I was the judge who'd put her cousin away. She'd stop by my house with crocodile tears, offering neighborly advice about joining the HOA to avoid trouble. I'd smile, my courtroom composure unshaken, and say, "I'm fine, Karen. My property, my rules." Her eyes would flash with rage, but she'd scurry off, plotting her next move. The HOA's tactics grew bolder, fake liens on my property, complaints to the city about code violations, even rumors spread about me being a troublemaker who'd lower property values. I documented everything, knowing I'd need evidence when the time came. Then came the fire. Karen and her cronies had escalated from harassment to arson, thinking they could scare me into submission. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I didn't cry over the ashes of my home. I got to work, channeling my fury into a plan to bring the HOA down. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was a federal judge with a Rolodex of law enforcement contacts and a knack for sniffing out corruption. First, I called Detective Maria Ramirez, a no-nonsense cop I'd worked with on a racketeering case. "Evelyn, arson's serious," she said, promising to fast-track the investigation. Next, I hired Tom Delaney, a grizzled private investigator, who'd once helped me nail a crooked CEO. Tom was a bloodhound with a nose for lies, and he dove into Willow Creek's HOA like a man on a mission. "These people are dirtier than a back-alley deal," he growled, handing me a cup of burnt coffee at a diner where we planned our strategy. Tom started with the HOA's finances, hacking through layers of poorly hidden corruption. He found bank statements showing thousands of dollars in dues funneled to offshore accounts, disguised as consulting fees for non-existent firms. Karen and her bored 3 lackeys, who nodded at her every word, had funded Caribbean vacations, designer handbags, and even a boat named Community Pride. But the real bombshell came when Tom tailed Eddie Matches Malone, a local thug with a rap sheet for arson and extortion. Eddie was the kind of guy who'd sell his own mother for a pack of smokes. Tom bugged a dive bar where Eddie hung out, recording him bragging to a buddy over cheap whiskey. "Yeah, that judge's house? Burned it for $5,000. HOA lady said she needed a lesson." My blood boiled, but I stayed calm. This was the break we needed, to tie Karen to the crime. Tom infiltrated an HOA meeting, posing as a new resident. He planted a tiny recorder under a folding chair in the community center, capturing Karen's venomous rant, "Evelyn Carter thinks she's above us. If she won't join, we'll make sure she has no home to come back to. The tape was gold clear, damning, and admissible. But I wanted more. I dug into Karen's past, suspecting her grudge ran deeper than my refusal to join. Late night. Call to a clerk at the courthouse confirmed it. Karen's cousin. Richard Baxter was the accountant I'd sentenced to 5 years for embezzling from a charity. Karen had been at his trial, glaring from the gallery. She didn't know I was the judge on that case, but she saw my defiance as a chance for revenge. It was personal. Tom and I worked late nights, piecing together a timeline. The Molotov cocktail matched Eddie's MO, crude but effective. A neighbor's security footage, recovered by Ramirez, showed a hooded figure near my house that night, driving a beat-up van registered to Eddie. We also found emails between Karen and a shady consultant who'd wired Eddie's payment through a shell company. Every piece fit like a puzzle, but I needed it airtight for court. I cross-checked every document, every timestamp, knowing Karen would try to wiggle out. By the time we were done, we had a case that could bury her. The HOA thought they'd silenced me. Instead, they'd handed me a sledgehammer. I filed a federal lawsuit against the HOA, Karen Mitchell, and her 3 board cronies, charging them with arson, conspiracy, racketeering under the RICO Act. The trial was set in my own courtroom, a fact I'd kept under wraps until the day arrived. So I donned my black robe and stepped onto the bench. The air in the room shifted. Karen, sitting at the defendant's table in a tacky blazer, looked smug until she saw me. Her jaw dropped, her face paling as if she'd seen a ghost. "You're Judge Carter," she stammered, her voice cracking. The gallery buzzed with whispers. I adjusted my glasses, my expression stone cold, and said, "That's right, Ms. Mitchell. Let's proceed." Her lawyer, a sweaty man in a cheap suit, fumbled his papers, clearly unprepared for this twist. My reputation as a no-nonsense judge preceded me, and the defendants knew they were in deep. The prosecution, led by a sharp young U.S. attorney named Lena Brooks, laid out the case with surgical precision. She presented Tom's audio of Karen's damning rant. "If Evelyn won't play ball, we'll make sure she has no home to come back to." The jury leaned forward, riveted. Next came Eddie Malone's taped confession, his gravelly voice boasting about the $5,000 payout for torching my house. Bank records showed the money trail funneled through a fake consulting firm controlled by Karen. Security footage from a neighbor's camera sealed it, showing Eddie's van near my house the night of the fire. Lena's closing argument was a masterpiece. This wasn't about community standards. This was a vendetta, a criminal conspiracy to destroy a woman's life over her refusal to bow to a corrupt HOA. Karen's defense was a train wreck. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a dedicated community leader harassed by my non-compliance. He even dared suggest I'd provoked the arson by antagonizing the HOA. I kept my composure, but my gavel twitched. When Karen took the stand, she played the victim, dabbing fake tears with a tissue. "I only wanted to maintain our neighborhood's beauty," she whined. I couldn't resist. "Ms. Mitchell," I interjected, my voice like ice. "Are you saying burning my home was part of maintaining beauty?" The courtroom gasped. Her lawyer objected, but I overruled, staring her down. "Answer the question," Karen stammered, her facade crumbling. She had no answer.
Us?
The jury saw through her lies. Cross-examining Karen was the highlight. Lena asked, "Why did you pay Eddie Malone $5,000 through a shell company?" Karen claimed it was for landscaping services. I raised an eyebrow and Lena pounced, producing Eddie's rap sheet and the bar recording. Karen's face turned, red, her hands shaking. The final nail was the revelation of her cousin's conviction. Lena asked, "Did your actions stem from a personal grudge against Judge Carter for sentencing your cousin?"
Us.
The gallery erupted.
Us.
Karen's lawyer shouted. Objections, but the damage was done. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours before returning, guilty on all counts. Karen and her board faced up to 20 years for racketeering and arson. I also ordered the HOA dissolved, with every cent of dues refunded to homeowners, as Karen was. Led away in handcuffs, she shot me a venomous glare. I met it with a calm nod. Justice was served. The verdict hit like a thunderclap, and the story went viral overnight. Headlines screamed, "Federal Judge's Home Torched by Rogue HOA." My YouTube channel, where I'd been sharing legal tips for years, exploded with subscribers. The video I posted about the case, how I took down a corrupt HOA, racked up millions of views in days. Comments flooded in from across the country. People sharing their own HOA horror stories, fines for kids' chalk drawings, threats over unapproved paint colors, even lawsuits for planting unauthorized trees. I read every comment, my heart swelling with pride, but also aching for those still trapped under petty tyrants. My story had struck a chord, turning my personal fight into a rallying cry for homeowners everywhere. I started a weekly series, Know Your Rights. It's breaking down legal strategies to fight HOAs, and my subscribers called me the HOA Slayer. It felt good to turn my pain into purpose. Rebuilding my home was my next battle. The insurance company dragged its feet, citing suspicious circumstances, but I wasn't intimidated. I'd faced down mob lawyers. The claims adjuster was child's play. Armed with the arson report and my court ruling, I forced them to pay out every dime. I stood on the scorched lot, envisioning my new home not just a replacement, but a statement. I hired a local contractor, a kind man named Javier, who'd also clashed with the HOA. And together we designed a house that screamed defiance. A modern colonial with floor-to-ceiling windows, sprawling rose garden, and best of all, a bright red mailbox that would have given Karen an aneurysm. As the walls went up, neighbors stopped by, some offering apologies. Greg, the nervous guy who'd been fined for speaking out, brought me coffee one morning. "You freed us," he said, eyes misty. "No more Karen, no more rules." I smiled, handing him a rose cutting. "Plant this to make it your own." The neighborhood transformed. Without the HOS iron grip, Willow Creek felt alive again. Kids rode bikes freely, lawns sprouted, wildflowers and porches displayed quirky decorations. A gnome here, a flamingo there. The community center, once Karen's war room, became a hub for potlucks and book clubs. I hosted the first one, sharing my story over homemade lemonade, urging neighbors to stay vigilant. "Never let anyone control your home," I said, and they nodded, inspired. The refunded HOA dues helped families pay off debts or fix their homes, a tangible victory from the lawsuit. I felt Tom's presence in every brick of my new house. Knowing he'd be proud of the life I was rebuilding. Back in my courtroom, I resumed my work with renewed fire. My gavel felt heavier, a symbol of the justice I'd fought for. The case had made me a local legend, with reporters begging for interviews and law students citing me in papers. But the real reward was my YouTube community.
How?
Every comment, "You inspired me to fight my HOA," or "Thank you for standing up," it reminded me why I'd shared my story. I ended each video with a call to action. If you're battling an HOA, document everything, stand firm, and fight back. Drop your story in the comments. I read them all. The HOA learned the hard way. Don't mess with a federal judge. My home is my castle again, and I'm ready to help others reclaim theirs. Justice always prevails.